You sound pretty sick.
Alright, welcome back once again to the Final Fantasy XIII series. Today we're going to be talking about Lightning Returns, Final Fantasy XIII, the direct sequel to Final Fantasy XIII-2, released back in 2014 to conclude a trilogy that nobody asked for. I actually had no idea there was a third game for Final Fantasy XIII until recently going through the series. Like, I knew of the first two games for the longest time, but Lightning Returns didn't exist in my world. I don't know. I mean, it kind of makes sense because this game was not very successful, making the least sales out of the three games by a wide margin, and as a third entry of a series that hasn't established a very positive reputation for itself, it's not particularly surprising that nobody really cared. But of course, sales don't necessarily correlate with quality, which brings the question of whether this game should remain overlooked, or is it actually a hidden gem worth playing? That's what we're gonna find out in this video. I'm sure this is a game that many have yet to experience, particularly due to the controversial nature of the original 13. Therefore, I'm gonna cut back on heavy spoilers for this one, but I will have to briefly mention some major events from Final Fantasy XIII-2 in order to talk about the setup for this game. So be aware of that, but without further ado, let's break down Lightning Returns Final Fantasy XIII to see if it's worth the time in 2022. So Lightning Returns is set 500 years after the end of XIII-2, where a mysterious energy force from the spirit realm of Valhalla known as Chaos was unleashed onto the mortal realm, eliminating the concept of time and slowly but surely consuming the entire world. All that's currently left is a set of 4 regions connected by a train system called Nova Chrysalia. The Chaos has also halted human aging, meaning that anyone still alive has lived for another 500 years without growing any older. The world has basically been in some sort of stasis for 500 years, and eventually Chaos will reach Nova Chrysalia in 13 days, because it's Final Fantasy XIII, resulting in the end of the world. This impending crisis has now incentivized God, like actual God, who goes by Bunavelza, to finally step in and get involved. He appoints our main protagonist Lightning to be the savior, and her job is to collect as many souls from this dying world as she can in 13 days so they can be transferred to a new world that Bunavelza will create once those days are up. Lightning agrees to fulfill this role on the condition that Bunavelza will resurrect her sister Sarah, who died at the end of XIII-2. So to both assist and make sure Lightning is carrying out her task, Bunavelza has also recruited Hope to operate as Lightning's eyes and ears from the Ark, a command center within a structure floating above Nova Chrysalia. Now, collecting people's souls isn't going to be as simple as just walking up and taking it from them. You see, the residents of Nova Chrysalia have all developed heavy emotional burdens at some point during the past 500 years, preventing them from opening themselves up to move on into the new world. So as the savior, it's up to Lightning to help these people with their depression or problems they have to set their souls free. In gaming terminology, you're gonna have to complete quests. Lots of quests. There are side quests, which are associated with random NPCs, and main quests, which of course involve prominent Final Fantasy XIII characters. Overall, we're looking at 4 locations, 5 main quests, 1 location having 2, and numerous side quests in each location. That's the setup for Lightning Returns. It's a very straightforward plot. I'd say those who haven't played the previous titles can even jump straight into this one because the game also does a good enough job filling in the backstory. Some things will definitely go over your head if you haven't played the first 2 games, but the overall story never gets more complicated than how I just explained it. Really bad things happened to the world in the last game, so now we're just striving for a fresh start. Now, it's frequently recommended that those playing Lightning Returns for the first time to play on easy, and that wouldn't be the worst idea because this game could be quite brutal starting on normal, which could negatively impact your experience. But I'm gonna be talking about this game on normal because that's what I played it on because
I like a challenge.
So first things first, I want to cover a major mechanic in this game that could potentially turn off a lot of players. With the world ending and all, there is a timer counting down to it. No, God! I myself wasn't too keen on this at first. The initial hours of my first playthrough were uncomfortable. Trying to familiarize myself with the game under pressure due to a time limit and having no idea how tight that time limit is definitely didn't make a good first impression. However, I did eventually get accustomed to this mechanic and even grew to appreciate it for how much it adds to the gameplay, which I'll elaborate on later. But yeah, there is a clock telling you how many days are left until the end of the world. As each minute in this game goes by in a few seconds in real time, a full in-game day is supposed to be 1 real-time hour. But a day will oftentimes go beyond a mere hour, because the clock is constantly going to be stopping. Anytime you talk to someone, it stops. Anytime you're in a menu, it stops. Anytime you engage in a battle, it stops. Furthermore, in the bottom left corner of the screen lies a circle with a number representing your energy points, also known as EP. You can spend these points in and outside of battle to perform various special abilities, and the most notable is undeniably Chronostasis. By activating Chronostasis for 1 EP, you can freeze the clock for a minute or so, which can be abused as long as you have the EP. With all these factors considered, a day should actually last between 2 to 4 hours. If you're wondering if 13 days is enough time to complete the game without stressing out, I'm gonna say yes, but it's more complicated than just yes. The thing is, you only need to complete the 5 main quests before time runs out to progress to the finale. However, you probably won't be strong enough to defeat the final boss if you didn't complete enough side quests, but that also depends on what difficulty you're playing on, and the amount of side quests you can complete depends on your experience with the game, or if you're using a guide or not. Like, you see what I'm saying? As long as you're managing your time halfway decent, you should be fine. The worst thing that can happen is you'll have to restart the game with your stats, equipment, and non-key items all carried over. It's like New Game Plus before even beating the game. I never had to do that, but to put things in perspective, I was able to complete all the main quests along with a handful of side quests by day 7 on my first playthrough. I'll let you determine for yourself if that seems like plenty of time or not. Okay, so now that we have the time mechanic out of the way, let's move on to the combat. Since you're only going to be playing as Lightning this time around, and the paradigm system from the first 2 games wouldn't work well with a solo party, the game introduces a new battle system, and it is something else. Abilities are now tied to the 4 face buttons on the controller, and Lightning will act accordingly to the buttons you press the moment you press them. No more waiting for an ATB meter to build up, all you get are immediate responses. But that's not to say that there isn't an ATB meter anymore. There certainly still is, and how it works here is it drains as Lightning executes abilities. Once the meter depletes, well, obviously she won't be able to attack anymore. And that's where the schemata comes in. Square Enix was like, oh, there wasn't enough Lightning in the last game? Well, here. So instead of extra party members, there's Lightning in different outfits, which you may have already noticed from the footage I've shown so far, particularly my stylish white suit.
She's so handsome.
Thank you. Anyway, with the push of a shoulder button, you can instantly change Lightning's outfit during battle, and it would have its own set of abilities and ATB meter. You're going to be able to equip up to 3 costumes at a time, and while one is active, the ATB meters of the others on standby will be recharging if not already full. So as long as you're efficiently cycling through your outfits, you should always have at least 1 ATB meter ready to be expended. This keeps the battles fast paced despite playing as one character. Now, each outfit doesn't come with preset abilities. They do all come with a locked ability, if not more, but abilities are actually acquired by defeating enemies and opening chests, which can then be assigned to whatever outfit you want. But keep in mind that each outfit does have their own unique stats. Some increase Lightning's magic, others increase her physical strength, definitely making certain abilities more compatible with certain outfits. As for the outfits, a couple of them are earned by completing certain tasks, but most of them are just purchasable from outfitters. Don't you judge me? This outfit has good magic stats.
Whatever.
See an outfit you like but not a fan of the color? Well, you have the option to change it to whatever color you want. And if the look of an outfit is more appealing than its stats, your equipment and accessories can always make up for it. You can even decorate Lightning with the silliest adornments, and whichever outfit you set as your primary, that's how Lightning will appear outside of battle, even in cutscenes.
Wow, look at you! You have the most amazing look, and it's like you have this incredible aura that screams, look at me! I mean, I bet people stare at you all the time. God, you're so lucky. What's your secret?
It's a dress-up simulator, and there's nothing more I would ask from it with its variety and flexibility. What's also great about the schemata system is that you don't need to craft the best setup to do well in the game. You just need a confident setup, and with 80 different outfits and tons of abilities to choose from, experiment away. Everyone has their own playstyle, find a setup that works for you. You'll have to indulge me, but early in the game I was trying out basically every ability I was getting, and one that really stood out to me was counter blow. So another important aspect of combat is guarding against enemy attacks, which is a staple ability to help reduce the damage you take, and there's also a perfect guard mechanic preventing any damage from being taken. I'm not too great with timing, so I prefer using counter blow. How this ability works is lightning will taunt the enemy for about 3 seconds, and if one lands a physical attack on her within those few seconds, she'll simultaneously evade the attack and counterattack. Discovering this ability really elevated the combat for me. I was starting to pull off some pretty sick combos, countering attacks coming from my back, countering enemies' counters.
Show of it.
I felt like an absolute badass. And that's another thing about this battle system. It's a lot more active. You constantly gotta pay attention to the enemy's movements, what they're doing, what they're about to do, so you can act accordingly. I like the paradigm system from the first 2 games. It has its own appeal for sure, but I prefer an action-oriented battle system. And it's done very well here. Another thing I'm a fan of is the challenge that this game offers, because a challenge provokes thoughtful decision making, right? After getting through the introduction and tutorials, the game's entire world is presented to you. You're free to go wherever you want, which also means you're gonna encounter monsters that vary in difficulty. Some you'll mop the floor with, some are gonna kick your ass, and some you'll be able to handle, but may be too strong to be fighting every time you see them. Because unlike the last 2 games, your health doesn't fully regenerate after every battle, unless you're playing on easy. You have to manually use recovery items, and you can initially only carry 6 at once. Your recovery item capacity is the size of one from a survival horror game. The same goes for your EP. There's only so much you can do with 5 EP, especially with it having a multitude of uses in and outside of battle. Both of these do gradually increase, and merchants are often accessible to restock on potions. But despite those things, resource managing remains quite prominent in this game, forcing you to make grueling decisions like deciding whether to activate an EP ability called Overclock to briefly slow down enemies in battle, or save the EP for chronostasis and endure a tougher fight, before engaging enemies. It's important to determine whether you have the strength and resources to even handle them, because a defeat doesn't result in a game over for you to simply retry. The only option then would be to escape, costing you an hour of the day, which is unfortunate, but I appreciate the consequence because it heightens the tensions of battles. Of course, you can avoid battles to ensure that you don't lose any time, but then you wouldn't be making as much progress in growing lightning stats. Speaking of growing lightning stats, how does that work? What's interesting about this game is you don't gain XP to level up or Christian points to increase your stats after every battle. Defeating enemies only earns you gil, abilities, monster materials, and a small amount of EP. By the way, more EP could mean more chronostasis, which also means that battles could, on the positive side, reward you additional time if you're able to handle them. There's a lot more depth to the gameplay in Lightning Returns. With so many mechanics to work with, it opens the door for players to come up with some pretty clever strategies playing this game, making for a gratifying experience. But getting back to growing stronger, the only way to get stat boosts other than using better equipment is by completing quests. Each time Lightning releases someone's soul, she obtains a radia, which is a form of energy that basically makes her stronger. And there's actually a third category of quests that I've been leaving out, which would be the Canvas of Prayers. So by every train station, there's gonna be a bulletin board where people post their wishes and prayers. And these are managed by the one and only Chocolina. She's back, no longer a merchant, but still has her teleporting powers standing by whichever bulletin you're at. On these bulletin boards, people from around the world are requesting particular items, mostly monster parts for their own intentions. Like this one person's asking for someone to slay and drive off chocobo eaters, because they're killing chocobos.
Oh, hell no!
And as proof that you granted this request, this person is also asking for 8 green monster moths, which are dropped by chocobo eaters once they're defeated. You turn them in, and boom, you get stat boost. So you don't increase lightning stats by defeating enemies alone. You do so by cashing in the loot they drop, maintaining the significance of battles. And because quests take time to complete, you're gonna grow incrementally. It's a clever way to organically keep the game balanced, unlike how the original 13 simply has level caps, while 13-2 suffers from being a bit too easy, as players can increase their stats as much as they like as long as they have the CP earned from battle to do so. I know that's how RPGs typically work, but I mean, how lame would it be if I got super strong by deciding to spend a few hours defeating these little gremlins that take a second to kill? Well, actually, I wouldn't be able to do that anyway, because once a particular monster is defeated enough times, a pink variant of it will spawn, indicating that it's the last of its species. These variants are called the last ones. They're stronger than their normal counterparts, but defeating them will drive that species to extinction. They will no longer be seen, and if you're sadistic as me and do that to most of the species of monsters, you could be running around with barely any enemies spawning anymore. The last ones do drop special items as well. Like, you see that giant pink blade this last behemoth is carrying? Well, I defeated it, and the blade was then mine. And it's like one of the best weapons you can have, especially for your first playthrough. Doing something as tedious as defeating 30 behemoths, which you don't have to, the game offers a great payoff. And I wouldn't even necessarily consider that tedious. It's a great way to get a hang of this fun combat system and master your setup, because it is crucial to memorize which abilities you assign to an outfit and which buttons you assign those abilities to. Your schemata rotation is also something you'll want to be familiar with. Since there's only a maximum of 3 outfits to cycle through, it only takes one button to shift to the one you want to use next. You just gotta know, is it the left shoulder button or right shoulder button from whichever outfit is currently in use. Knowing these things not only maximizes your combat capability, but makes battles all the more enjoyable. With that, let's move on to another substantial aspect of gameplay, which of course would be the world you're going to be experiencing as you're carrying out God's will. As established, Nova Crystallia is made up of 4 regions, each with distinct characteristics and environments. There's the City of Luxarian, a holy city run by a religious organization that worships Bunavelza. This is probably my least favorite out of the 4 locations. I'm personally not a huge fan of gothic settings because they're generally so brown and bland, which is the case here, and the lighting's often not very great no matter what time of day it is. I do like all the locations for how they're unique from one another, but the other 3 are certainly more pleasant places to be at, such as the City of Yusnan. It's a party city where people are in a constant state of celebration since the world is ending. I definitely like the aesthetic of the city a lot more, as it's home to a number of restaurants and attractions. It's much more lively and captivating than Luxarian. If I'm not being productive saving souls, this city's where I'll most likely be hanging out. Moving on from urban areas, we then have the Dead Dunes. It's a huge open desert that's sparsely populated for obvious reasons, but there are tombs to explore and a bandit camp located at the heart of the desert with all the types of shops that are in this game. This is by far the best designed region for players to conveniently traverse. You see, there's these red cactuars scattered around the desert that you can run up to and activate, which can then be used to fast travel to any other cactuar you previously interacted with. This incentivizes you to fully explore the desert on foot first to find all these waypoints, and from there, fast traveling becomes a thing of beauty. Need to get back to the train station? There's a cactuar there. Need to get back to camp to replenish on potions? There's a cactuar there. Need to be anywhere in the desert? There's likely a cactuar nearby. This is in contrast to the Wildlands, which has no fast travel system, but part of the main quest here centers around nursing a chocobo back to health, which you can eventually ride, offering an efficient way to traverse easily the largest region in the game. This location features many distinct terrains such as a forest, canyon, plain with small villages spread out throughout the land. All 4 of these locations are well designed for the theme they're going for. I also really like how the environments change at different times of the day. Like when it's 5 in the morning in Yusnan, dawn is breaking, it's quiet, no one's really out yet. But during the day, the sky's blue, more people are wandering around, the city feels more alive. And at night, fireworks are going off, people are playing music, chocobos are dancing. It really adds immersion to the experience. I did grow attached to this world and even became very familiar with it despite the time mechanic, spending approximately 40 hours traveling back and forth between the 4 regions completing quests. And the quests are actually gonna be the last thing I want to cover, so let's do that and finally start wrapping this thing up. So due to this game's open world design, you're gonna be able to tackle the main quests in any order you want. As I said, they involve saving the souls of familiar characters that Lightning has been acquainted with from the previous games, which is why they're the main quest. But for the sake of avoiding spoilers, I'm gonna focus more on the side quests. So throughout Nova Chrysalia, you're gonna encounter a lot of NPCs with stars above their heads, ranging from 1 to 3. The more stars, the longer or harder the side quest will be. I have very mixed feelings about these quests. One gripe is that most of these people's problems don't match the tone the game establishes. Hope explained that all of these people have been in despair and holding on to regrets for years, and it's up to the savior to lift their burdens so they can move on into the new world. Well, I encountered this one farmer whose sheep has run off, so I helped him herd them back, and then he gave me his soul. That's a pretty underwhelming reason not to be content with your life. The sheep are gonna die in the chaos anyway. I would be a better fit to be in this game. But that's not saying that I dislike the quest itself. I didn't hate taking a little break from battles to herd some sheep for some easy stat boosts. Another minor complaint I have is that a lot of these quests involve people asking Lightning to simply find things for them. Now, I didn't really mind fetch quests here because the NPCs have different motivations for the items they're looking for, keeping things somewhat fresh and interesting. The problem is the game often doesn't provide any hints on where to find the items, which is especially annoying since this is a time-sensitive game. That's why I quickly mentioned a guide earlier, because a guide is seemingly required to complete a lot of these quests. By using a guide, I found out that an item someone needs is obtained by completing a different quest, which I can imagine would really frustrate players actively running around trying to find it, because almost every other fetch quest in this game involve items that are either picked off the ground or purchasable from shops. I guess the game expects players to just move on to other things and eventually stumble upon the items they're looking for. Okay, this is actually kind of a double-edged sword. Another thing I appreciate about this game is that you can discover items NPCs need before even talking to them. When I was exploring the Dead Dunes, I was finding Bhakti oil, having no clue what's it for, and eventually I found a robot named Bhakti who needed my help because it was low on fuel, and it runs on, you guessed it, Bhakti oil. This freedom is mostly beneficial on subsequent playthroughs since you will be excessively multitasking, acquiring a bunch of items, remembering how or where to get them, and knowing that you'll need them later on. Lightning Returns is really only a satisfying game when you know what you're doing. There's just that obstacle of having to become familiar with it, which can certainly be unpleasant at times. That said, there are quests in this game that I genuinely find amusing. For another quest, I came across an NPC in Yusnan standing by this 5-star restaurant telling me that he was stood up on a date, so he had to cancel the reservations he made for tonight.
Unless, that is, you want to go?
Wow, how could I say no?
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
So you have the option to come back between 7 to 11 PM with the dress on to go on a date with this handsome gentleman. The game implements both the schemata system and time mechanic to make such a simple yet entertaining side quest.
You came after all. You look absolutely beautiful. You're like an angel from heaven.
I heard this place serves a mean steak.
And notice that this quest needed to be done at a specific time of the day. This applies to a majority of the quests because this world and the NPCs actually have schedules. So even though the quests are mostly average, I still found myself engaged at optimizing my schedule to accomplish as many of them as possible. For example, each day starts at 6 AM. So let's say I decide to start and spend most of my day in the Wildlands. Once it's like 5 PM, I'm gonna stop what I'm doing, start heading to the train station so I can get to Yusnan around 7 to go on a date with that one guy. And after having a mean steak, since I'm already in Yusnan, I might as well take care of all the business I currently have here. Once I'm done with that, I'm actually not gonna head back to the Wildlands to continue where I left off. I'm gonna head to the slums in Luxarian and work on quests there because that section of the city is only open from midnight to 6 AM. Some may find the schedules to be inconvenient, but the appeal is to work around them. If time management isn't your thing, this game probably isn't for you. When I was working on the main mission in Yusnan, this guy told me to come back to him at 12:30 AM to progress the quest, but it was only about 8 PM for me. And here's another little layer with this game. Sometimes you're gonna find yourself wanting to kill time instead of trying to extend the day as long as possible. Like, I don't want to use chronostasis in this situation because I'm trying to get the clock to hit 12:30 AM so I can complete this quest. Anyway, 4 in-game hours is quite a bit of time, but not long enough for me to leave the city. So I ran around Yusnan resolving other quests and came back to the guy at 12:35 AM. He told me that I was late and to come back the next day at the same time. Like damn, I was 5 minutes late. But you know, I wasn't even that mad. Being late then gave me 24 in-game hours to do literally anything else. I could continue other quests in Yuthnaan. I could go to another region and work on quests there. And if you really don't want to wait or do other things, there are even inns where you can just go to sleep until a certain time. The game is never really inconvenient depending how you look at it. Each day also ends at 6 AM, so once the clock hits that time, Lightning will automatically get summoned back to the arc where Hope is. It's essentially a way to divide the days apart. Here your EP gets refilled, you turn in the souls you saved that day, and can relax because time is frozen at 6 AM. By the way, you know how I've been saying that the world ends in 13 days? Well, that was kind of a lie. The game actually starts with 6 days left, but you delay the apocalypse by saving souls. For instance, by the end of my 3rd day, the game indicated that it was day 4 with 7 days left. Once day 4 was over, I cashed in the souls I saved that day and it was then day 5 with still 7 days left. I was able to buy another day with the amount of souls I saved for a maximum of 13 days. Once you're ready to head back to Nova Chrysalia, you can choose to go back to the exact same spot you were when you got called up, or you can travel freely between any of the 4 regions if you've been to them once. From there, it's a new day to save more souls. So there's plenty of other things in this game that I haven't touched upon, but that's about everything I found most noteworthy. So to me, Lightning Returns is the best entry in the Final Fantasy XIII trilogy. And I know that's not saying much, so I'm gonna have the nerve to further say that it's a pretty darn good game. But like any good games, even great ones, it's not gonna be for everybody. Not everyone's gonna be able to get on board with the time mechanic. It's a game almost entirely based around obscure side quests. The story's nothing to write home about, which has been the case in each entry of the series. But at the end of the day, Lightning Returns is on another level from its predecessors in terms of gameplay. The combat's phenomenal, dressing up Lightning's really fun, there's a well-designed world with lots of interesting mechanics. I ate this game up. It's still far from being a top tier Final Fantasy entry, but if you don't mind a simple plot from start to finish with really not much characterization from most of the characters, Lightning Returns could be a really fun time. So if you skip this one because it got lost in the weeds or something like that, and what you've seen here interests you, I'd say give it a go. It was recently added to Xbox Game Pass earlier this month, if that applies to you. It's truly a hidden gem.
You mustn't say that, Kupo. If you keep praising me so much, my bubble might burst, Kupo.
Alright guys, that's all I got for Lightning Returns. Thank you guys so much for watching and sticking with it for this long. Hopefully you enjoyed the video or found it helpful. I'll see you in the next one. I'm out of here.